just had the nerve to ask me, what do I use to dye my hair? I am a natural blonde.
Jade Elise McKizzic was just 20 years old, a student at the University of Houston, and a young woman with her whole future ahead of her. She came from a supportive family, she was loved by her friends, and she had goals that extended far beyond the walls of the classroom. She was described as smart, determined, and responsible. But on the night of September 11, 2025, Jade disappeared. That night, she was out with friends, doing what countless college students do, enjoying time away from schoolwork and the stress of daily life. Nothing about the evening seemed unusual. There were no signs of distress, no arguments, no warnings of what was to come. At some point, Jade left her phone behind. That small detail would later become one of the most puzzling parts of her case. Soon after, cameras captured her entering a local gas station. She was alone. She purchased a drink, walked back out, and appeared calm. There was nothing in her movements that suggested panic or fear. From there, Jade walked in the direction of Brays Bayou. And that was the last time she was seen alive. 4 days later, on September 15, Jade's body was discovered in the water at the 4900 block of Spur 5, more than 2 miles from where she was last spotted. Authorities confirmed it was her. Welcome to Viral Crimes. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. Jade Elise McKizzic was not just a name in the headlines. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a student with ambitions bigger than herself. At only 20 years old, Jade had already shown determination and drive that set her apart from many her age. Born and raised in Texas, she grew up in a family that valued education and resilience. Friends and relatives described her as full of energy, with a smile that could light up a room. She wasn't someone who simply drifted through life. Jade had goals, real concrete goals. At the University of Houston, Jade was known as someone who pushed herself to succeed. She took her studies seriously, and she dreamed about building a future that would not only benefit her, but also her family. She was the kind of young woman who balanced school with friendships, always finding time to check in on people she cared about. Her friends described her as the one who was always encouraging, always willing to listen, and always reminding others of their worth. She was social, yes, but she was also grounded. She wasn't known to be reckless or careless. That's why her disappearance struck such a painful chord with those who knew her. Her family, especially, spoke about her kindness and her determination. To them, Jade was more than just a student working toward a degree. She was a source of pride, someone who was going to make a difference, someone they believed would one day achieve great things. She loved being around people, but she also carried herself with independence. She wasn't naive. She wasn't someone who made unsafe choices without thought. That makes the question surrounding her final night all the more confusing. Because when someone like Jade, a young woman with so much potential and no obvious reason to walk into danger, suddenly disappears, it shakes everyone who knew her, and even those who didn't. Jade McKizzic should be remembered not just for how her life ended, but for who she was. Ambitious, bright, deeply loved, and determined to succeed. Her story is a reminder that behind every tragedy is a person with dreams, with family, and with a future that was stolen far too soon. The evening of September 11, 2025, began like any other for Jade. She spent the day attending classes at the University of Houston, keeping up with her studies, and checking in with friends. She looked forward to a night out, a small break from the pressures of school and life. That Thursday evening, she joined friends to relax, enjoy the city, and unwind. There was laughter, conversation, and the casual energy of youth. Nothing seemed unusual. No one noticed anything that would indicate the tragedy that lay ahead. At some point during the night, Jade made an unusual choice. She left her cell phone behind. For someone in her position, a student, a young woman, someone always reachable, this was highly uncharacteristic. Phones are lifelines, sources of communication, and tools for safety. Leaving hers behind has puzzled investigators and remains one of the central mysteries of her disappearance. Later that evening, surveillance cameras captured her at a nearby gas station. She entered alone and purchased a drink. Observers noted that she appeared calm, composed, and normal. There were no signs of distress. She seemed like the same Jade her friends had spent the evening with, relaxed and unhurried. From there, her path took a turn that no one could explain. Instead of returning to her friends or heading back to her residence, Jade began walking toward Brays Bayou, a waterway that runs through Houston and has a long history of accidents and drownings. The footage shows her moving alone, steadily, as the city lights reflected off the streets and cars passed by. It is the last confirmed sighting of her alive. What happened next is still unknown. Jade never returned to her friends that night. She never made it home. Hours turned into days, and her absence was noticed. Her family, initially thinking she may have stayed out later than expected, soon realized something was seriously wrong. Friends called her repeatedly. She did not answer. Messages went unanswered. Anxiety began to grow, slowly turning into fear. Every passing hour without news deepened the concern. Where was Jade? What had happened to her? This night, which began like any other, had become the starting point of a mystery that would haunt her family, friends, and the Houston community for weeks. As hours turned into a full day without contact, Jade's friends and family began to realize that something was seriously wrong. At first, there was hope that she had simply stayed out later than planned or had gone to a friend's house. But by the following morning, the worry intensified. Her family called her friends, neighbors, and even checked local hospitals. Social media posts began circulating, asking if anyone had seen her. Flyers with her photo and details of her last known whereabouts were distributed across the University of Houston campus and nearby neighborhoods. Every lead was followed, every tip investigated. The university community quickly rallied. Students shared her disappearance widely online. Friends organized search parties, combing streets, alleys, and public areas near Brays Bayou. Volunteers coordinated with local authorities, hoping for any sign that Jade was safe. But days passed, and the anxiety only grew. On September 15, 2025, 4 days after she was last seen, the tragic answer arrived. Officials were called to the 4900 block of Spur 5, near Brays Bayou. There, in the water, they found a body. It was Jade. The discovery shocked her family and the community. A young woman with a bright future, gone. The distance from her last sighting, over 2 miles, immediately raised questions. How had she ended up so far from the gas station where she was last seen? Had she walked there on her own, or had someone else been involved? Authorities performed an autopsy to determine the cause of death. But they found, or rather, what they did not find added another layer of mystery. There were no obvious signs of trauma. No evidence of assault. No indications that she had been physically harmed by another person. For investigators, this presented a challenge. How do you explain a death with no clear cause and no apparent injury? For her family, the uncertainty was agonizing. There was no closure, only the pain of losing Jade and the endless questions that came with her death. Her disappearance and subsequent death would spark theories, speculation, and a deep desire for answers. The case would not just be a local tragedy, it would become a story that captured the attention of Houston, raising questions about safety, responsibility, and the unseen dangers that can change lives in an instant. Once Jade McKizzic's body was discovered in Brays Bayou, law enforcement immediately launched a full-scale investigation. Their first task was to reconstruct her final hours, piecing together what had happened between her last confirmed sighting at the gas station and her tragic discovery days later. Investigators examined surveillance footage, retracing her steps to determine the route she may have taken. The footage confirmed that she had been calm at the gas station, purchasing a drink and leaving alone. There was no indication of anyone following her. No altercations were recorded. Police canvassed the surrounding areas, speaking to potential witnesses who might have seen her walking through the streets or near the bayou. Neighbors and passers-by were questioned, but most reported seeing nothing unusual. The area around Brays Bayou is known for being dimly lit at night, making it difficult for any passerby to notice someone walking alone. Autopsy results provided little clarity. Law enforcement considered multiple possibilities, ranging from accidental drowning to potential foul play, but no definitive answers were found. Each theory had its strengths and weaknesses, leaving the case frustratingly unresolved. Even after reviewing every available detail, from camera footage to witness statements, the timeline between her last sighting and the discovery of her body remains largely unknown. Small gaps in time, mere minutes or hours, leave space for uncertainty, fueling speculation and deepening the mystery surrounding her death. Jade's disappearance and death became not only a personal tragedy for her family, but also a complex case for investigators, highlighting the challenges of solving cases with limited evidence, ambiguous circumstances, and the haunting reality that some mysteries may never be fully explained. Without definitive answers, every theory remains a possibility, and each question only deepens the sense of mystery. For Jade's family and friends, these theories are more than speculation, they are attempts to understand the unimaginable. Why did this happen to her? How did a young woman with so much promise meet such a sudden and unexplained death? For the public and investigators, exploring these possibilities highlights both the challenges of piecing together a mysterious death and the reality that some cases may never provide closure. Jade's story, while tragic, serves as a reminder of how quickly life can change, how easily someone's fate can be altered in a single night, and how sometimes the answers we seek remain frustratingly out of reach. The death of Jade McKizzic did not just affect her immediate family. It shook the University of Houston community and reverberated throughout the city. For her family, the loss was devastating. Parents, siblings, and relatives struggled to comprehend the suddenness of her disappearance and the unexplained nature of her death. Every unanswered question was a fresh wound. Friends and classmates were equally affected. Many shared memories of studying together late at night, long conversations, and moments of laughter on campus. Students held impromptu vigils, lighting candles and gathering to honor her memory. Her professors spoke of her as a model student, dedicated and bright, someone who stood out in a crowd not for loudness, but for her intelligence and warmth. Social media played a central role in the community's response. Hashtags and posts circulated rapidly, calling attention to her disappearance and encouraging anyone with information to come forward. People who had never met Jade shared condolences, photos, and stories, united by a shared sense of sorrow. The tragedy also raised concerns about safety on and around the University of Houston campus. Students became more aware of the dangers of walking alone at night, especially near Bray's Bayou. Discussions about campus security, lighting, and community vigilance intensified in the wake of her death. The police organized search teams to canvass the surrounding neighborhoods and areas near Bray's Bayou. This included walking patrols, officers in vehicles, and K-9 units trained to detect human scent. Boats were deployed in the bayou to inspect the water and banks, while drones were used to survey difficult-to-reach areas. Neighbors, pedestrians, and anyone in the area that night were interviewed. Most reported seeing nothing unusual, which limited the leads investigators could follow. Gas station staff provided detailed statements about her demeanor and the exact time she left, which helped narrow down the timeline. Jade's phone had been left behind, complicating the investigation. Without GPS tracking her recent calls and messages, law enforcement had to rely on her friends' accounts and CCTV footage to trace her steps. Social media activity prior to her disappearance was examined, looking for any signs of threats, unusual messages, or plans she may have made that night. Once her body was recovered from Bray's Bayou, an autopsy was conducted to determine cause of death. Investigators looked for signs of trauma, assault, or defensive wounds, but found none. Toxicology reports were also performed to rule out alcohol or drug involvement, yet these results were inconclusive in explaining why she ended up in the water. Limited physical evidence. Gaps in the timeline between her last sighting and her body discovery. Areas with no surveillance coverage. No witnesses to her final movements. Despite these obstacles, law enforcement followed every lead available, reconstructing the timeline as best as possible and exploring all possibilities: accidental drowning, suicide, or foul play. Each avenue was examined rigorously, but the case remained a mystery, highlighting the difficulties police face when evidence is scarce and circumstances are unclear. The investigation into Jade McKizzic's disappearance demonstrated both the thoroughness of law enforcement and the frustrating reality that even with modern technology, some cases are incredibly difficult to solve. Reconstructing Jade McKizzic's final movements is critical to understanding the mystery of her disappearance. The timeline begins at the University of Houston, where she spent the day attending classes and meeting with friends. From there, she left campus in the evening to join friends off campus, engaging in typical student activities like socializing and grabbing refreshments. The last confirmed sighting of Jade occurred at a gas station near the campus. Surveillance footage shows her entering alone, purchasing a drink, and leaving shortly thereafter. She appeared calm, composed, and entirely untroubled. There was no sign of distress, no indication she was being followed, and no visible reason for alarm. From the gas station, Jade began walking in the direction of Bray's Bayou. This route included several streets with uneven sidewalks, limited lighting, and areas that were quiet or sparsely populated at night. Certain streets along the way were prone to shadows and blind spots, making them difficult for witnesses or cameras to capture. Investigators mapped out potential paths she could have taken. Some routes were longer but better lit, while others were shorter but more isolated. Determining her exact path proved challenging because there were gaps in surveillance coverage, and no witnesses confirmed seeing her along the streets leading to the bayou. Environmental factors also played a role in this analysis. The weather that evening was mild, with no heavy rain or storms, making walking conditions generally safe. However, the darkness combined with the isolation of certain areas increased risk. The bayou itself presented hazards: steep banks, slippery edges, and deep water just steps from the sidewalks. Even a cautious person could easily encounter danger unknowingly. Behavioral analysis was also considered. Leaving her phone behind is unusual for a college student, particularly one who was responsible and safety conscious. Investigators speculated on potential reasons. Perhaps she intended a short walk without distraction, or maybe she didn't anticipate needing the phone. Regardless, the absence of her phone complicated tracking her movements and limited immediate communication with friends or family. Timing and distance were analyzed to estimate how long it would have taken Jade to reach the bayou from the gas station. Depending on the exact route, it would take roughly 15 to 25 minutes to walk the distance. Within that window, any encounter, accidental slip, deliberate choice, or interaction with another person could have occurred. Yet, with no direct evidence, investigators could only hypothesize about what happened during that crucial time frame. Every step she took on that night becomes significant. Each street, each corner, and each darkened area represents a fragment of the puzzle. While the cameras provide some answers, the gaps in her path highlight the difficulty of reconstructing events when so little evidence exists. This analysis of Jade's last known movements underscores both the physical dangers she may have encountered and the unresolved nature of her disappearance. Even after mapping her path in detail, the question remains. What happened in those final moments that led her to Bray's Bayou and ultimately, to her tragic death? With little physical evidence and many unanswered questions, numerous theories emerged about what happened to Jade McKizzic. While none have been confirmed, examining them helps viewers understand the range of possibilities surrounding her tragic death. The most straightforward theory is that Jade accidentally fell into Bray's Bayou. The bayou is notorious for its uneven banks, slippery edges, and hidden currents. Even a careful, cautious person could lose footing, particularly at night when visibility is limited. Some investigators believe that Jade, walking alone and potentially distracted, may have approached the water unknowingly. The lack of trauma on her body could support this scenario. She may have entered the water gently, yet the currents could have pulled her in unexpectedly. While plausible, it raises the question. Why does she walk toward the bayou alone that night? Another theory considers the possibility of suicide. Leaving her phone behind and walking alone could indicate a deliberate attempt to isolate herself. Some experts point to the bayou's history as a site for intentional harm. However, friends and family consistently described Jade as cheerful, ambitious, and excited about her future. There were no warning signs of depression or previous suicidal thoughts. While it cannot be entirely ruled out, the evidence does not strongly support this scenario. Foul play is also a possibility. Could someone have coerced Jade or followed her to the bayou? The streets she walked on were relatively quiet at night, and gaps in surveillance leave room for speculation. Yet, investigators found no signs of struggle, no witnesses to any confrontation, and her belongings aside from the phone remained intact. While the possibility exists, there is no concrete evidence to suggest she was attacked or harmed by another person. A young woman with a bright future, full of dreams and potential, had her life cut short under circumstances that remain unclear. Her disappearance and death highlight the fragility of life and the unforeseen dangers that can exist even in familiar environments. Every step she took that night, from the campus to the gas station and ultimately toward Bray's Bayou, became part of a timeline that can never be fully explained. For her family, the grief is immeasurable. The absence of answers leaves a void that cannot be filled. Friends mourn a classmate and confidant whose laughter and presence are now only memories. The University of Houston community grapples with the reality that tragedy can strike unexpectedly, even close to home. Theories abound: accidental drowning, suicide, foul play, yet none provide certainty. The gaps in the evidence, the unanswered questions, and the missing pieces of her final hours remind us that sometimes, despite the best efforts of investigators, the truth remains just out of reach. Yet, amid the sorrow, Jade's life cannot be forgotten. She was intelligent, kind, ambitious, and deeply loved. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of personal safety, the need for awareness in our communities, and the value of looking out for one another. Though the mystery remains, Jade's legacy endures through the lives she touched, the community awareness her story sparked, and the ongoing conversations about safety and vigilance. Her life, while tragically brief, continues to inspire caution, compassion, and remembrance. In the end, the case of Jade McKizzic is more than a mystery. It is a call to cherish every moment, to protect ourselves and others, and to honor the memory of those whose stories end far too soon. Her life, her presence, and her memory remain with us, reminding us that every life matters, and every unanswered question leaves a lasting impact. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.